Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video, we're going to talk about hedging. So in terms of hedging, this is a very complicated dot point in the Business Studies HSC syllabus. If you are trying to understand it and you are losing your mind, if you are trying to understand this and you are slowly or quickly losing your mind, you are not alone. Hedging is a very complicated topic, and that the dot point itself is not an easy thing to one, understand, or two, apply. So what I'm going to do is to try and break it down in a series of videos to take it step by step and as simply as possible to try and help you understand it effectively. So that what we'll do in this video is we'll look at an example of how hedging helps a business. In this case, we'll talk about Qantas because that's the case study that we do in terms of the big case study at my school. So what I'll do is I'll go through a worked example looking at why Qantas would hedge in terms of a particular area of its business, the kind of things that happen in terms of the risks of not hedging, and then how it can be helpful. Anyway, it will make much more sense after you've seen the example. But before we get into that, let's just talk about hedging more generally. Hedging is where you take out an insurance policy to protect against a particular outcome. So it's not actually taking out an actual insurance policy. It's just taking steps to protect against outcomes you don't want. Let's look at a very basic example. Let's say that it looks like that the weather might turn to rain. That's a possibility. You do not want to get drenched and get your Air Jordan 7s totally ruined. So what you're going to do is you are going to pack an umbrella. The umbrella is the hedge. That you have got the umbrella in order to protect against the outcome that you don't want, and that is being saturated by the rain. In terms of a business isn't really able to carry an umbrella that protects against all the possible risks that could happen. But what the business does is it takes out like a metaphorical umbrella to protect against changes in things like input prices, such as fuel, or changes in currency movements that could affect the level of profits. So what we'll do is we'll get into a specific example based on Qantas, and then we'll come back and chat about that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a specific example involving Qantas and the concept of hedging. And that our scenario here that we're going to be discussing is that Qantas buys a plane from Boeing. And the really important part before we get started is that the price of the plane is in US dollars. Qantas, being an Australian company, primarily deals with Australian dollars. Yes, there are expenses that will be in foreign currency, such as the plane, and we're going to look at why that matters. So if we're understanding this situation, we circle Boeing and we'll put this here as we say, well, Boeing, it doesn't want Australian dollars. That if we think about things for Boeing, if we think about wages, if you think about rent, if you think about its expenses in general, that these mainly involve US dollars. So Boeing is not going to say to Qantas, yeah, just pay us in Aussie dollars. Boeing is going to want US dollars. Let's say that the price of the plane is $3 million US dollars. That's how much it's going to cost Qantas in order to purchase this plane. Let's say that right now, or at present being in the example. So let's say that in this example, at present, when Qantas is doing the deal, $1 Australian buys $1 US. So that the situation is something called parity. Parity being where the exchange rates are of equal value. You get 1 for 1. So that if the price of the plane is US 3 million, Qantas will have to pay 3 million Aussie because the currencies are worth the same amount. So this seems fine for Qantas. It's just like, oh, okay, it's going to cost us $3 million. So let's say that the Australian dollar weakens versus the US dollar. And when we say weakens, what we are talking about is that the value of the Australian dollar depreciates against the US dollar. So let's then provide a different situation where now 1 Australian dollar equals 50 cents American. Here, 1 for 1. Here, 1 Australian dollar now only gets 50 cents American. So you can see here that the Australian dollar is much weaker. So if we put ourselves in Qantas's shoes now, is that the price of the plane is still 3 million US. But the challenge for Qantas now is that this whole amount is now 6 million Australian dollars. So that the cost of this asset has doubled because of the change in the exchange rate. This is a problem for Qantas because expenses are much higher now. So just a quick summary before we go on to the next part. Before, when the currencies were at parity, it's just 3 million to 3 million. Well, not just, that's still a huge amount of money. But when the currency depreciates, now 6 million Aussie is going to buy you the plane, which is a problem for Qantas because that's a huge difference in expenses. Qantas would want to avoid this situation. They want to, or let's say it this way, Qantas would want to avoid this situation. Qantas would want to protect itself if the value of the Australian dollar changes. So what might happen is that when we go here and we say, okay, so 1 Australian dollar equals US dollars 1, what might happen when they are equal is that Qantas will, so what will happen when the value of the currencies is equal, when we have the situation of parity, is that Qantas will buy extra US dollars, even if they don't need them right now. That when they are of equal value, Qantas would actually buy some extra US dollars, would actually stock up on US dollars. So let's put that into some words. Qantas buys extra US dollars and keeps them in reserve just in case. When we have this just in case comment, that signals to me that what Qantas is doing here is it is hedging. It is taking out an insurance policy in inverted commas, just in case things change. So that, let's bring this down here. If we look at it, let's say that the Australian dollar falls, right? So that changes, and that we know now the price of the plane is 6 million at this currency. But what we've got here is that Qantas has a stack of American dollars in reserve that were bought when the currencies were equal, so that even though the currency has depreciated, Qantas can use the old US dollars that it bought when the currencies were equal, so that effectively the plane is still 3 million Australian dollars because Qantas thought ahead and they are using the old value of the currency, which is stronger. When you hear things like just in case, thought ahead, reserves, these all indicate to me that we are talking about hedging. So let's just provide a quick summary comment over here, and then we can put it together. Okay, so by hedging, Qantas protects itself against unfavorable currency changes. It could be other changes, but for this situation, we're looking at currency. And the way that it has done that is that Qantas has a stack of US dollars, a reserve of US dollars that were purchased when the Australian dollar was stronger. So when the Australian dollar gets weaker, it doesn't matter because Qantas has got that insurance policy of the currency that was stronger or the currency that was bought when the Australian dollar was stronger. So that was the example about Qantas. You can see that the change in currency could affect the business pretty substantially in terms of its expenses and therefore its profits. So by hedging or protecting against currency movements, unfavorable currency movements, that can really help the business. There will be future videos that really look at other elements of hedging, the specific strategies set out in the syllabus, so look out for those. And as always, thank you very much for watching.